First, over to the ongoing situation in Venezuela. President Nicolas Maduro is standing firm and denouncing the international campaign aimed at trying to remove him from office. This comes just one day after violent clashes erupted on the streets of Caracas after opposition leader Juan Guaido announced he was the interim president of the country. Both gave speeches to large crowds of supporters. On Thursday, President Maduro ordered American personnel out of the country, but President Trump says the embassy will remain open. Countries across the globe are continuing to take sides as this political turmoil deepens. So joining us now to discuss the latest out of Venezuela, Mr. Thomas Trottier. He's a member of Hands Off Venezuela. Thomas, thanks for being with us today. Maduro has responded to Washington's moves against him. He's electing to end at least some of the diplomatic relations with the U.S., including telling U.S. diplomats that they got to leave, they got to get out of Venezuela. Meanwhile, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says, no, we're not calling our guys home. So now what? Can they stay? What happens to them if they do?
Well, I think the U.S. diplomats should adhere to what the Venezuelan government's asking them to do. If they're being asked to leave, they should leave. But I think we're with the Hands Off Venezuela campaign. We set up this campaign to get out the truth about the Venezuelan revolution, and we want to definitely alert as many people here in the United States about the real efforts by the United States government to try to interfere with the people in Venezuela and their rights to self-determination. We believe really the defense of the Venezuelan revolution really needs to rely on the masses in Venezuela along with their allies, the workers in this country.
And talk to us a little bit about history here. Historically, what happens when the U.S., decides for a sovereign nation who their new leader should be?
Yes, well, the United States government is a government of, by, and for the very wealthy, right? The richest 1% own more than the bottom 90%. Historically, this government, not only here in the United States, but abroad, it serves only the interests of these rich. It's not serving the interests of the majority in this country, and it's certainly not doing anything in the interests of the masses in the other countries. The history of the United States in Latin America is very, very nasty. The United States has supported coups, has supported brutal dictators. The U.S. military has been used directly in many countries. And, it's not a very good history from the point of view of the masses in Latin America or the people of the United States.
And Thomas, as we know, money talks, and Venezuela is certainly very oil rich. They have the largest reserves in the entire world. A lot of people would guess Saudi Arabia, but it's really Venezuela. They have almost 300 billion barrels. How much do you think this plays into how the U.S. is approaching the situation in Venezuela, how they're approaching Maduro?
Well, it obviously has a lot to do with it. I mean, first of all, the example of the Venezuelan Revolution was something that created a tremendous amount of fury among the rulers in the United States, right? Like, here you had a country which nationalized the oil companies, was using the profits from the oil to help the people of that country. That was an example that the United States did not like. Here in the United States, instead of nationalizing oil companies and using the profits to help people, what the United States government does is it taxes working people and takes their money and gives it to the banks and gives it to the wealthy companies. So obviously oil is a very important commodity, and the United States obviously wants control of that.
Okay, and the Venezuelan military, we know they are backing Maduro because he is the democratically elected president. Whether people dispute the validity of that election or not, he is who democratically was elected. They say they will defend their country's sovereignty. Do you think this is code for a possible emerging civil war or some sort of war?
Well, the United States, if they can't get a coup, they may be trying to provoke a civil war for sure. But I will say this, I really think the defense of the Venezuelan revolution, a revolution is the masses coming out and trying to take control of society into their own hands. The success of the Venezuelan revolution is the masses intervening. I think the only way to really defend the Venezuelan revolution is the masses need to be armed. There needs to be workers' militias. There needs to be, armed armed peasant committees. This is the way that really, if you remember the 2002 coup against President Chavez, the attempted coup, it was when the masses came out into the streets. That's when the coup, was defeated. So I think it's the same thing. Yeah.
And I want to play you a couple sound bites from both Maduro and Guaido and get your thoughts on the other side of them.
We have multiple relations with the United States. I have broken political and diplomatic relations with the Donald Trump administration. I haven't broken relationships with the U.S. Our relationships with the United States continue, and they are going to flourish now more than ever.
I think the pressure that the European Union is doing to not legitimize Maduro is fundamental. We have to go deeper in the sanctions, and we hope to hear from the Pope and the European Union to increase the pressure to support the democracy that represents the parliament and the Constitution of Venezuela.
There you heard, Thomas, very different remarks from the two men, both trying to gain power there in Venezuela. The elected president, Maduro, says he hasn't completely broken off ties with the U.S. Meanwhile, the guy that's self-proclaimed president is saying he's applauding sanctions being placed on his country. What do you make of that?
Well, obviously, Guaido is nothing but a tool of U.S. imperialism and the European Union, those imperialist countries, and of course, the counter-revolution in Venezuela. So we know exactly where he's coming from. But again, I would say this, we can't rely on any appeals to the United States government, whether it's run by Trump or run by the Democrats or anybody else. The allies of the Venezuelan revolution are the working class and the masses in the United States. I think that's part of the Hands Off Venezuela campaign, is that we try to connect those issues. Like, for example, the fight against U.S. interference in Venezuela to us goes hand in hand with the fight against this government shutdown that's going on in this country. Those are the real allies of the Venezuelan people. The U.S. government is not an ally of the Venezuelan workers or people.
All right. Thank you so much for spending some time with us today. Thomas Trottier.
Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out our channel. We hope you enjoyed the video. We have tons of content for you just like this. For more of RT America's one-of-a-kind news and analysis, be sure to subscribe and never stop questioning more.